Chapter 1055. Just as Hsu Fengnian was about to leave, a young man rushed into the small courtyard, carrying a bag of rice on his shoulder. Hsu Fengnian did not stand on ceremony with him, accepting the bag of rice with a smile and pouring it into the rice vat. The young man beside him was surnamed Zhu, and his name was Zhengli. They had gotten to know each other through drinking. He was a local born and raised in Bishan County, and he claimed to be a poor son of a small family that had been rejected by a wealthy family in Yanji County. How could Hsu Fengnian not have guessed that he was a true descendant of the Zhu family? However, since Zhu Zhengli was unwilling to admit it, he did not expose him. Zhu Zhengli had a free and easy temperament, and was one of the few righteous sons of a large family. It was probably because of his Beiliang's knight-errant nature that he did not mix well with the other sons in Bishan County. Instead, there were many disputes. A few years ago, because of an incident that implicated his family, he had gotten into a heated argument with the previous county magistrate. One must know that the county magistrate was not an official. The county magistrate's position was not high, but it was the local emperor under the provincial governor. To be able to sit in this position, one must have a background that was not to be underestimated, and one must also have an extraordinary knowledge of officialdom. It was easy for him to cause the downfall of the commoners. Zhu Zhengli dared to provoke the county magistrate because he himself did not understand the ways of the world. Moreover, the Zhu family in Bishan County did indeed have a deep foundation. If the head of the Zhu family really spoke, not only the county magistrate, even the governor of Yanji County, Hong Shandong, would have to obediently keep quiet. It was only because the Zhu family had retired in recent years that the monkeys in Bishan County were able to become kings. Zhu Zhengli was a guy who liked to nag. At this time, he was laughing at how Shu Qi's position as a registrar was too shabby. He couldn't get anything out of it, and it would be hard for him to not be filthy rich. He even said that Shu Qi's family must have used up all their savings to donate such a lousy position. Otherwise, how could he have fallen to such a miserable state without food? Hsu Fengnian didn't refute him. He just smiled and reminded this guy not to expose others' shortcomings in front of a dwarf. Zhu Zhengli laughed loudly, but didn't continue to nag about Shu Qi's dire situation. Hsu Fengnian took out a pot of green ant wine. The two of them sat under the grape trellis, each holding a large white porcelain bowl. The sun in Beiliang was particularly vicious. Summer had just begun, but it was already as unbearably hot as Jiangnan. The good thing about it was that as long as they stayed in the shade, the wind would cool them down. With a bowl of green ant wine for each of them, the two of them were even more carefree than immortals. Hsu Fengnian drank a mouthful of wine, squinted his eyes and smiled drunkenly. He asked, "Today, there are real shortages everywhere in Yuzhou. Why don't you tell your elders to find a loophole? Make up your mind and take out a few hundred taels of silver to find a backdoor. Then, find a famous person with a bit of reputation and ask for a recommendation letter. Even if I don't become a county registrar, it won't be difficult for me to get an official position. In the future, I won't be able to make a name for myself in Beiliang's underworld. It's even more impossible in the future. It's better to be a civil official." Zhu Zhengli shook his head like a rattledrum. What's so good about being an official? It's not good to ride on the heads of ordinary people. Not to mention that I came from a poor family. Even if I did have money, I wouldn't waste it. If I really want to be an official, it's better to join the army at the border. It's more comfortable to rely on one's own ability to earn real military merits. Hsu Fengnian joked, "With your mediocre skills, it's fine if you fight in an ordinary battle. Not to mention encountering crows, even if you run into the second-rate cavalry of Beimang, it's no different from throwing your life away. No matter how boring it is to be an official, is it interesting to be a dead man?" Zhu Zhengli sighed and rubbed his chin. "That's why my grandmother doesn't want me to join the army. She said that she'd rather have me eat and wait for death in Bishan County than to see her own child die. She also said that if I dared to sneak out of Yanji County, she'd find someone to break one of my legs. Heh, my grandmother always keeps her word. Everyone in my family is afraid of her, like a mouse in front of a cat. I wasn't afraid when I was young, but I became more and more afraid when I grew up." Hsu Fengnian mischievously asked, How's your little sister, who fell in love with County Magistrate by at first sight? Zhu Zhengli felt a toothache when he heard this. With a bitter face, he said, I'm puzzled. You have the same rank as that embroidered pillow by Shank, and you're even more handsome than that pretty boy. It's strange, my little sister doesn't like you and insists on getting close to that guy surnamed Bai. She doesn't even have the modesty that a woman should have. That's fine, but there's an old saying that a man chasing a woman is separated by a mountain, and a woman chasing a man is separated by a layer of gauze. I don't think that guy surnamed Bai gives my little sister any face. That's why I'm so worried. And if that scowling guy really becomes my brother-in-law, I'll definitely. Shu Qi, what's that saying again? HSU Fengnian laughed. Chickens and dogs hear each other's voices, but they don't interact with each other for the rest of their lives. Zhu Zhengli slapped Registrar Shu's shoulder and didn't forget to wipe the wine off his hand. He laughed. Shu Qi, no wonder you can become our Bishan County's registrar. You've studied for a few days. I can't do that. Once I touch a book, I faint and want to sleep. If I were to practice martial arts, I wouldn't have a problem even if I didn't rest for a few days and nights. But my grandmother wouldn't let me practice martial arts no matter what. Sigh, brother, I'm just a waste of my talent. HSU Fengnian smiled and said bluntly, your talent is average and can't be much better. I'm only telling you the truth because we're friends. Zhu Zhengli didn't get angry. He glared at him and said, when Wang Xianji first started out in the martial arts world, the seniors in the martial arts world said that her talent was average. Besides, I don't have to be a world-shaking hero to practice martial arts. It's fine if I can beat up a few bullies in the village. HSU Fengnian nodded. Zhu Zhengli finished a bowl of wine and shook the wine pot. There was about half a bowl left. He put it down and said that he had snuck out from home to get some fresh air. He still had to go back and deal with the books of the saints. If his grandmother found out, he would be crippled the next time they met. HSU Fengnian didn't send him off. He laughed, remember to bring wine the next time you visit. Zhu Zhengli, who had jogged away, turned around and raised his middle finger. HSU Fengnian smiled and poured himself another half bowl of wine. He sat alone under the grape trellis. The breeze caressed his face and he was in a good mood. Before he finished drinking the green ant in his bowl, he put the bowl on the bamboo chair and stood up to welcome the guest. A white-haired old woman slowly walked into the courtyard with a walking stick. She was stunned when she saw HSU Fengnian. She sat down in front of HSU Fengnian. HSU Fengnian only sat down after she sat down. The old woman was the head of the Zhu family in Bishan County. The Zhu family had 4 generations. In the previous 3 generations, there were more females than males. Zhu Zhengli was the only child in his generation. According to the family tree in the ancestral shrine, there should be 6 or 7 uncles. However, none of them were alive today. It was the same for the previous generation. The old woman was the eldest daughter-in-law of the Zhu family. As time passed, she became the true backbone of the Zhu family in Bishan County. She was considered a virtuous and respectable mistress in the entire Yanji County. It was said that when the Shu family took over Beiliang, General Shu Xiao and Princess Consort Wu Su had stayed in the Zhu family. Just based on this, who would dare to belittle the Zhu family in Yuzhou, let alone Yanji County? Moreover, the 12 men of the Zhu family of 2 generations had all died at the border in the past 20 years. The old woman was slightly lost in thought. She looked at HSU Fengnian and said softly, "You really look like him." HSU Fengnian wanted to say something but stopped. The old woman waved her hand. She leaned on her walking stick with both hands and looked at the door of the courtyard. She said, "At first, I wanted to see the Registrar General who could make my grandson call him brother. After seeing him, I understood. Back then, when the head of the Zhu family met the general, it was more or less the same situation. The general didn't put on airs. My husband wanted nothing more than to repay him with his life. He was clumsy and didn't say much, but he did." HSU Fengnian said in a low voice, "This old man, please don't worry. I definitely won't let Zhu Zhengli follow in his ancestors' footsteps. This time, I took root in Bishan County and didn't even dare to visit the Zhu family. It was a coincidence that I met Zhu Zhengli. In the future, when I leave, it's likely that we won't meet again. I hope this old man won't worry." The old woman grunted and didn't say anything else. The old woman sat quietly for the time it took for a stick of incense to burn. She slowly stood up. Hsu Fengnian stood up and walked her to the door. The old woman suddenly asked, "Can you really defend it?" Hsu Fengnian replied calmly, "If we can't, I'll have to trouble this old man to tell Zhu Zhongli that Shu Qi ran to the Central Plains to become an official." The old woman reached out her trembling hand and touched Hsu Fengnian's head. The old woman slowly walked towards the carriage that was parked at the corner of the alley. Before she got on the carriage, she saw the young man at the door silently watching her leave. She murmured, "So similar." Chapter 1056. The capital of Yanji County was close to Qingan County. Hsu Fengnian, as the county clerk, didn't visit Governor Hong Shandong back then. This time, he rushed to the capital because he had other plans. Now, he didn't even have a coachman by his side. Xu Yanbing went to Gourd Mouth of Yuju to serve as one of the 8 captains of Beiliang's border. His main purpose was to intimidate the important people in the border army who were related to Yozhou's general family. Xu Yanbing was one of the 15 people in the new martial arts evaluation. Just this point alone was enough to make people afraid. Moreover, he was once Xu Xiao's trusted retainer. In the spring and autumn period, it was common for a ruler to bestow a surname to his trusted subordinates, especially those who were born in the wilderness. However, there were only a few people on Xu Xiao's side. Liu Yanbing was one of them. It was said that a new ruler brings in new subordinates. Xu Yanbing had been trusted by the king of Beiliang for 2 dynasties. In the eyes of outsiders, even the infantry commander Yang Wenwan had to give him some face. Now that the new King Liang, who was ranked 6th in the world, was said to be able to take on 2,000 cavalry, who would protect him? When Hsu Fengnian led his horse into the city, he used Shu Qi's identity and had an official's record. Naturally, he was unimpeded. When Hsu Fengnian entered the capital, he saw many young men and women in luxurious clothes. They all got off their horses and walked through the city gate. Even after passing through the city gate and getting back on their horses, they didn't dare to gallop wildly. They were no longer as arrogant and unrestrained as before. Moreover, no one dared to carry a Beiliang saber. It was probably because the smell of blood in Yuju had yet to disperse. Half of the northern Liang's heroic image had been forcefully stripped away. After Hsu Fengnian entered the city, he continued to lead his horse slowly toward a rare house with mountains and water. In Beiliang, one only needed to look at the amount of water, the number of wells, and the amount of winter snow stored in the cellar. It was even more impressive to be able to be near a lake. As for Mount Qingliang, since the family head's surname was Xu, it didn't need to be said. Within Yanji County, Hu Bai was a spy. He was still very young, but his senior spy had placed high hopes on him as early as his youth. It wasn't common for a spy to become an official in Beiliang, but logically speaking, it shouldn't be difficult. Hu Bai was very handsome. He didn't read much, but he was born with a scholarly air. The turtle spy in Yanji County had once been his master's subordinate, so he had taken care of Hu Bai in silence. As a result, he had assigned him a job that didn't require much effort, but was very pleasing and beneficial to his future. At first, when Hu Bai heard that he was going to be a woman's spy, he wasn't very happy. He only listened to orders, as that was the duty of a spy. However, when Hu Bai became the young and rich shopkeeper of the silk shop on this street and saw the woman with his own eyes, he didn't have any complaints. Hu Bai had seen many beautiful women. Some were as flirtatious as peonies, some were as pure as white lotuses. He had even tasted the flavor of the courtesan of a large brothel. His state of mind was always as tranquil as an ancient well, but he had never seen such a soul-stirring woman. Moreover, there was something else besides her appearance that made it even more difficult for Hu Bai to let go of. Hu Bai followed his duty and didn't dare take a single step past the minefield. He didn't take the initiative to meet her. She rarely showed her face on the street. From the time she appeared in the silk shop until she disappeared, it was only a door's distance away. Hu Bai didn't even raise his head. He could only watch her out of the corner of his eye. Occasionally, He would lie on the roof in the middle of the night and drink wine. He would glance at the pitch-black courtyard not far away and know that she lived there. Hubei didn't probe into her background. He only wanted to be able to guard her like this, neither near nor far. One day at a time, and it would be best if he could spend a lifetime with her. He only knew that the woman's surname was Pei and that she lived in seclusion. She had never had a social interaction with the officials and nobles of Yanji County. Her temperament was always cold and cheerless. Even though this unavoidably gave people a feeling of lethargy, it was still breathtaking. There were many manners of influential people in Yanji County nearby, and it wasn't that there weren't people with a keen sense of smell who would act upon hearing the news. On a dark and windy night, Hubei had personally knocked out more than 10 people, including their master and servants. The military chancellor, who was as fat as a pig, was choked by Hubei's neck, lifted a foot off the ground, and viciously smashed his head against the wall of the alley, causing him to faint on the spot. That night, when County Governor Hong Dong heard about this matter, he got out of bed in a hurry and flew into a rage. He actually mobilized a large force and quickly mobilized 30 armored soldiers armed with crossbows to drag away those fellows. The next day, not only did the military chancellor lose his official position, his entire family was expelled from the county city. After that, no one dared to fight anymore. There were still people who wanted to fight to win a smile from the beauty, but they never saw that door open. Later on, it was unknown what the county governor said, but the loafers in the noble families who liked to pretend to be cultured disappeared overnight. That alley returned to its original tranquility without a trace of smoke and fire. Today, Hubei was skillfully dealing with the wealthy women in gold and silver, earning the best money in the world. Between transactions, it was unknown who was taking advantage of who. He was teasing 2 women who were like wolves and tigers when he suddenly caught a glimpse of someone leading a horse past the door. In the blink of an eye, he sized up that person from head to toe, not even missing the quality of the horse and the material of the saddle. Not sensing anything strange, Hubei planned to withdraw his gaze. Unexpectedly, that person, intentionally or otherwise, turned his head to look inside the shop and happened to meet Hubei's gaze. The two of them almost smiled at the same time. Hubei waited for that person to ride past and disappear from his sight before he frowned. However, when he thought about how there were many hidden guards on this street and how there was no lack of experts who were more skilled in martial arts than him, he didn't worry unnecessarily. The corners of his mouth curled up, thinking that the young master's appearance was extremely pleasing to the eye. In Yanji County, which was full of beautiful women but sloppy men, it was indeed rare to see such a person. When the women in the shop saw the smile on Hubei's face, they were even more willing to spend a lot of money. However, when they held the satin material, the strength of their palms that brushed against the back of Hubei's arm quietly increased. After Pei Nanwei moved into this courtyard, she left behind 2 diligent young maidservants to serve her, but they couldn't be considered intimate. She would only joke with them when she was in a good mood. These were all teasing words from an experienced woman. She would ask them if they had someone they liked or if they needed her to be a matchmaker. The maidservants would always blush and mumble, not knowing how to answer. After laughing, Pei Nanwei would turn around and forget about it. She didn't really want to be a matchmaker. Over time, the 2 maidservants roughly understood the temperament of the mistress of the courtyard. At first, they thought that she was a concubine kept in a golden house by some official in Yanji County. Later, they didn't see any men enter the courtyard, so they didn't have this conjecture. She was such a great beauty that even they couldn't take their eyes off of. If someone really took a fancy to her and raised her here, how could he bear to throw her away and not come back to pamper and dote on her for a few months? Today, maidservant Xu Hai heard a series of tireless knocks on the door. At first, she didn't want to pay attention to it, thinking that it was an ignorant fellow who would soon be dragged away like a dead dog. But after half a cup of tea, the knocks didn't stop. Xu Hai was puzzled. Was there really such a hero in the county capital who didn't fear death? She hesitated for a moment, thinking that since her mistress was in the backyard and couldn't hear anything, she might as well go and take a look to see who was so reckless. When she opened the door, she was immediately stunned. Oh, it was a handsome guy, so handsome that he looked like a scholar from the novel Gifted Scholar and Beautiful Woman. Moreover, after he opened the door, He smiled at the maidservant Zhu Hai across the threshold. His smile made Zhu Hai's heart beat like a deer. She only felt that he was gentler and more handsome than shopkeeper who from the neighboring silk shop. Hsu Fengnian gently said, "My name is Shu Qi. I am the prefect of Bishan County. Your mistress Pei knows me. May I trouble you to inform her?" The maidservant was in a difficult position. She knew about Bishan County, and she also knew the importance of a prefect. But if this person said that he knew her mistress, she wouldn't believe it even if she was beaten to death. "Young Master Shu, no matter how handsome you are, it's not a reason for you to swagger into the courtyard." She didn't dare to disturb Mistress Pei because of this. If everyone had to report their name, this courtyard would have long been trampled over by the group of lechers from Yanji County. Even the limestone bricks on the ground of the alley would have to be replaced. Zhu Hai's face was full of suspicion and doubt. She was unwilling to move, so she just stared at him, unwilling to turn around. Hsu Fengnian was also a bit helpless against this dutiful maidservant. After thinking, he said, "Prefectural Governor Hong Shandong sent me here. If you inform Mistress Pei and she still refuses to see guests, you can hit me with a broom. Is that all right?" Chapter 1057. In Yanji County, Hong Shandong was already the highest-ranking official. To be able to work in this courtyard, the servant girl, Zhu Hai, also knew the severity of the situation. After thinking for a moment, she said earnestly, "I'll go and inform the young lady. I won't close the courtyard door, but you're not allowed to walk into the courtyard without permission." Hsu Fengnian nodded. The servant girl turned to leave, half believing and half doubting. She didn't forget to turn her head to see if the young man was really being obedient. Seeing that he didn't move at all, she quickened her steps and boldly went to the rear courtyard to inform the young lady. Hsu Fengnian sat on the threshold, his back to the courtyard. He looked at the horse on the street that couldn't be considered a good horse, but it wasn't a bad one either. As for the few pairs of cold eyes hidden in the shadows, Hsu Fengnian could easily and clearly feel their heartbeats. Hsu Fengnian was somewhat moved by their strict adherence to their duties. When outsiders mentioned Beiliang, their first impression would definitely be of the invincible cavalry and the White Horse Scouts. However, they weren't familiar with the Beiliang spies and death soldiers that Chu Lushan had single-handedly created. In fact, over the years, there hadn't been many battles between the two armies on the battlefield. However, the exchange of lives between Beiliang and Beimang's spider web and Liang's Jiao Go had never stopped. Hsu Fengnian came to his senses and turned his head to look. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The servant girl actually carried a broom and angrily ran over. She wouldn't stop until she kicked him out of the door. He didn't need to guess to know that the woman, Pei Nanwei, had set a trap for him. Hsu Fengnian stood up and watched the servant girl use the broom to use the long-lost dog-beating stick technique in Jianghu. He quickly left the courtyard and retreated to the bottom of the steps. He laughed angrily at the courtyard door and said, "The one surnamed Pei, you win." The maidservant stood at the door angrily and waved the broom. She suddenly turned her head and saw her miss standing on the steps in the courtyard with a smile that she had never seen before. There was no coldness when she was listening to her report. Only then did Zhu Hai realize that she had most likely made a big mistake. She turned her head and looked pitifully at the young master named Shu Qi at the foot of the steps. The young man who was almost hit in the face by the broom smiled and walked up the steps. He was not angry. He took the broom from her hand and stepped over the threshold. He glared at Pei Nanwei who was gloating. "Is it very fun?" Previously, she had lost her status as Princess Jing'an. Now, she didn't even have a place in the beauty rankings. Her expression turned cold once more. The servant girl, Zhu Hai, stood timidly behind Hsu Fengnian, not knowing what to do. The other servant girl stood behind Pei Nanwei. She looked at the young man who was dressed in plain clothes. Like Zhu Hai, she felt that it was inconceivable. Their miss had once casually refused the visit of the prefectural governor in Yanji County. When Sir Hong heard of this, he was furious. He didn't even fart. After waiting for an answer at the courtyard door, he turned and left. Since that was the case, perhaps only the provincial governor of Yuju had the qualifications. But where did such a young and high-ranking person come from? He was the eldest son of the administrator and the #1 official in Bailiang's court, Li Hanlin. A prodigal son who had turned over a new leaf was more precious than gold. He had made a name for himself on the border. But wasn't he just a ranger of the crossbow cavalry? Pei Nanwei's expression was full of mockery. She sneered softly, "Zhu Hai, my Jiao, why haven't you paid your respects to the king of Bailiang who is visiting Yanji County incognito? You should know that you won't get another chance like this if you miss this village. Not everyone can meet the youngest pillar Guo of the Liang dynasty." The two servant girls didn't have time to distinguish between the truth and the lies. They were so frightened that they fell to their knees with a thump. Zhu Hai, the servant girl who had been holding a broom, immediately burst into tears. Hsu Fengnian said softly, "Get up. Don't listen to your miss nonsense." The servant girls didn't dare get up even if they were beaten to death. They would rather believe that it was true than not. Who would dare joke around with their lives? If it really was that new king of Bailiang who killed without blinking an eye, wouldn't killing these two servant girls be as easy as breathing? Besides, the whole of Bailiang was amazed that the new king of Bailiang was the 6th most powerful person in the world. If he was happy, wouldn't he have his cavalry kill people? If he was unhappy, he would do it himself. Hsu Fengnian put down the broom and said to Pei Nanwei, "I am now the secretary of Bishan district. I need someone to cook. Do you have any ideas?" Pei Nanwei said resolutely, "No." Hsu Fengnian dismissed it with a smile. He walked over and picked up the girl, then walked towards the courtyard door. Pei Nanwei wanted to see the world in chaos. She screamed, "Someone come. Someone is kidnapping a girl." No one paid attention to her fanning the flames. The two servant girls secretly looked up and saw their miss, who had a cold temperament, screaming like she was possessed. No matter how young they were and how inexperienced they were still girls. They could tell what was going on. They didn't dare to get up and watched as their miss was taken away by the young man who might or might not really be the king of Bailiang. Outside the door, Hsu Fengnian threw her onto the horse's back and led the horse out of the alley. The spy, Hu Bai, walked through the alley. He glanced at the silent girl on the horse's back. He lowered his head and continued to walk. The word wish rose in her heart, but died in an instant. Xu Fengnian turned his head and looked at the back view that could not hide the loneliness. He did not speak. After leading the horse out of the city, he mounted it and sat behind Pei Nanwei. They galloped all the way back to Bishan County. Soon, everyone in the county knew that the Registrar General had a beautiful wife. It was really a failure in the officialdom. It couldn't stop this Registrar General from being proud of his love life. When the county premier, Zhuo Jing, heard that everyone in the county Yarman was talking about this, he couldn't hold back anymore. It was the first time he took the initiative to bring wine to his humble home. It was indeed amazing. However, the woman was wearing a bramble hairpin and a cloth dress. It was really a trap for Shu Qi, who had fallen from grace. If it was him, wouldn't he serve her like a female bodhisattva? However, the woman, who looked like she had just become a wife, didn't pay attention to anyone. After arriving at Bishan County, she only dragged Registrar General Shu to buy tea, rice, oil, and salt for the first 2 days. She took care of the house in peace. When she met with visitors who had ulterior motives, she only showed her face slightly as the mistress of the small yard. She barely maintained her etiquette and didn't show any friendliness. They could only see her moving the worthless potted plants and feeding the chickens and ducks in the corner. Zhuo Jing was so sly that he played a trick. He intentionally let Registrar General Shu Qi handle some unimportant old cases in the county Yarman. The woman would also come slowly with a box of food. She would wait for Shu Qi to finish the piping hot food before returning with the box. It was so simple, but it was enough to hook the eyes of the people in the county Yarman to the ground. They couldn't wait to be stepped on by her. Even County Magistrate Feng Guan, who had always been arrogant, started to chat with Shu Qi, his subordinate, punctually at noon. However, when the woman showed up, he would take the initiative to leave. Even County Magistrate Bai Shank didn't try to get close to Shu Qi. He just changed his clothes every day. Someone started calling the woman Madam Shu. After she nodded and smiled, the title Madame Shu gradually spread throughout the county yamen. Obviously, thanks to Madame Shu, the Registrar General finally looked like an official. Every 2 or 3 days, people would invite him to drink. Shu Qi didn't refuse any of them and would return home reeking of alcohol. This day was the summer solstice. In the twilight, Hsu Fengnian looked drunk but his eyes were clear. He returned to the courtyard and sat at the table. Even though he had already eaten, he still ate simple dishes with more vegetables than meat at the same table with her. These days, it had been like this. During the day, they didn't talk much. At night, they didn't sleep on the same bed. Hsu Fengnian could be considered to be sleeping on the floor. If news of this spread, it would definitely make people happy. It would make those old men who had lost their souls feel relieved. Hsu Fengnian sat in the courtyard and enjoyed the shade. Pei Nanwei cleaned up the dishes and lay on the bamboo bench beside Hsu Fengnian, gently shaking a reed fan. Pei Nanwei said, "It's the summer solstice." Hsu Fengnian grunted. Pei Nanwei stopped fanning and asked, "Many people are going to die in Guangling?" Hsu Fengnian was silent. Pei Nanwei raised her head and looked at the twilight. She laughed softly and said, "The good people in the history books are all perfect people without any flaws. As for the bad people, it seems that they can't do a single good thing. If you were to die one day, wouldn't there be a single good word about you?" Hsu Fengnian squatted on the small bench and still didn't say anything. He only took the fan in her hand. He wasn't as stingy as she was. After waving the fan, both of them felt cool. Pei Nanwei leaned to the side and gazed at him. "Aren't you number 6 in the world? If you can conjure 1 or 2 mu of reeds for me, I'll let you sleep on the bed tonight." Hsu Fengnian calmly said, "Even if I'm an immortal on Earth, I still don't have this ability. Besides, what's the difference between letting me sleep on the bed and you sleeping on the floor?" Pei Nanwei held her belly and laughed. Then she winked at him and said, "You're the number 6 in the world for nothing." Hsu Fengnian laughed. "Who said I wasn't?" Chapter 1058. A group of 50 cavalrymen galloped through the grasslands bordering Liangmang toward a pasture heavily guarded by soldiers. Bei Liang placed unparalleled importance on horse control. Every single one of these cavalrymen carried a saber and crossbow, and their war horses were all of the best quality. Clearly, they were the elite fighting force of the Bei Liang. Of the 80 types of horse stalls in Beimang, other than the crow stalls that Dong Zhuo had raised with countless gold and silver tails, there were no other enemy scouts that the crossbowmen took seriously. This was not because the crossbowmen were blindly conceited, but because they had slowly accumulated their self-confidence through countless close combat and bloody battles. As for the white horse scouts, which could be considered the most majestic of the crossbowmen, to put it bluntly, any one of these cavalrymen would have to make a detour and make way for them. Moreover, they would be wholeheartedly convinced of their superiority. This group of former members of the Little Snow Battalion had just accumulated enough military merit to be promoted to the White Horse Scouts. Thus, they had been specially granted permission by the Beiliang Protector General, Chu Lushan, to go to the Xianli pasture to select war horses. If these 50 cavalrymen did not deserve to be proud, then who else in the world deserved to be proud in front of them? During the assault that had turned the Southern Dynasty into a civ last year, this group of cavalrymen had opened a path for the 8,000 Longxiong army and the Great Snow Dragon Cavalry. They had uprooted more than 10 Beimang beacons and beheaded no less than 200 people. Of the 50 scouts that had penetrated deep into the hinterland, only 4 were left alive. They were the group leader Li Hanlin, the group leaders Lu Dou and Li Shiyu, and the group leader Hu Tu. Among the 46 new riders, most of them were old scouts, but there were also some who were transferred from the Longxiong army to the Little Snow Camp. For example, the youngest group leader and the youngest crossbowman was a baby-faced teenager named Flea. He used to be a cavalryman of the Longxiong army. He participated in the Battle of Huluku and killed 4 enemies, which was not too shocking. However, he killed 18 horses, which made the recorder who recorded the military exploits speechless. This teenager, whose ancestors were herdsmen of the border, also made people dumbfounded. He didn't want the military exploits, but he squatted beside his beloved dead horse and wailed, which shocked Yuan Zhuozong and the deputy commander of the cavalry. Old General he squatted beside the kid and tried to comfort him for a long time, but it was useless. He was so angry that he slapped the kid's head and angrily asked his retinue to bring him a horse that he had ridden for less than half a year. The teenager didn't show any politeness to Commander He and accepted it unwillingly. He even had a bastard attitude of accepting it. If Yuan Zhuozong didn't drag him away, the bad-tempered commander he would have kicked the little bastard. This was not a joke. When he had just become a crossbowman, Sergeant Hong Run had already suffered. In the end, he was beaten into a pig's head by the nimble young man. The young man's martial arts were not methodical. His skills were all unorthodox, especially his horsemanship. He was so skilled that he could lie down and sleep on the back of a galloping horse. Among them, only Sergeant Li Hanlin could touch Big Flea. In fact, if it was a fight, Sergeant Lu Do could easily defeat the young man. However, he could not withstand the repeated defeats of this rash young man. Lu Do could not really kill this stubborn child. Besides, he was not in the mood to tease this subordinate. In the end, only Sergeant Li Hanlin could kiss Big Flea. Now that they were close to Xianli Ranch, one of the best places in Beiliang, the air was filled with the strong smell of horse dung. The 50 cavalrymen almost sniffed at the same time. Their faces were full of intoxication. Many men in brothels would not feel so comfortable lying on the soft and tender bodies of women. Standing on the back of Big Flea's horse, it was as if his feet were nailed to the horse's back. He looked around and quickly made a gesture unique to the crossbowmen of the Little Snow Battalion. Deputy Commander Li, who had received the enemy intelligence, laughed and scolded, "Flea, you've gone crazy from wanting to fight. You haven't even tasted a woman before. You're such an energetic young man. Last time, when Commander Li took us to the brothel, we all thought that one of them was too little. We were afraid that Commander Li's prestige would be affected. Look at Fang Hutu, he only called 3 sisters. He wasn't worried at all that our Commander Li's purse wasn't full at all. Look at you, you're squatting in front of the door, saying that you're going to keep watch for us. Aren't you ashamed?" Fang Hutu, who looked fierce but had an extremely gentle temperament, chuckled and touched his lips. Flea curled his lips and said disdainfully, "What sisters? You're calling them aunts." Sergeant Li used to say that old cows eat young grass. Fang Hutu, on the other hand, said that young cows eat old grass. What a waste. What's the difference between that and a colt eating grass? I think it's shameful. Fang Hutu grimaced. Li Hanlin chuckled softly and said, "That brothel in Liangzhou's frontier fortress is not bad. But compared to my hometown in Lingju, it's really far away. If there's a chance in the future, I'll take you to Lingju to ride horses. There are plump women, thin women, tall women, petite women, pointy chins, perky butts, and big breasts. There are all kinds of women." Riding horses was a term used by Beiliang Frontier Army. More than 40 cavalrymen behind Li Hanlin had drooling faces. There were also people like Li Hanlin who wiped their mouths and drooled. Only the young man rolled his eyes and said, "You guys are fooling around. Don't drag me into it. I'll be fine as long as I have a Big Flea. If there's a girl I like in the future, I'll go through the wedding ceremony with her." A bald cavalryman who was sitting cross-legged on the back of a horse had a sweet grass stem in his mouth. He laughed and said, "Flea, don't tell me you like men. What do you think of me? I'm a man who weighs 200 pounds. I have muscles, stamina, and spear skills. If you don't like me after you try me, you can always return me." Flea was a flea. However, he had been in the army for many years. He had heard all kinds of dirty words. He glanced at the big bald man and said, "Xiegong, go and ride the mare you're sitting on. No wonder I hear your little date screaming in the stable every night. Take it easy. It's Beiliang's iron law to treat the war horses well. If you, Xiegong, really hurt little date, even our platoon leader can't protect you." Li Shiyu, Fang Hutu, and this group of rough men all roared with laughter. Xiegong didn't seem to mind at all, shaking his bald head and laughing to himself, not forgetting to bend down and pat his mount's back. This man who had once used his fingers to gouge out the eyeballs of a northern Mang scout and eat them used an exceptionally gentle voice to say, "Little date, don't lower yourself to our squad leader's level. It's easy to reason with someone who's high enough to bully others. Originally, the crossbowmen didn't have the habit of giving nicknames to their war horses. However, the young man had given each of the 50 war horses a name, such as Xiegong's Little Date, Fang Hutu's Big Yuan, Li Shiyu's My and Kangzhen's father-in-law. No one could escape this calamity. Over time, everyone tacitly agreed. Flea suddenly shouted, "Platoon leader." Li Shiyu rolled his eyes and said, "You're the only one who shits and pees so much. Big or small? Can't you bear it any longer? It's only a few steps until we reach Xianli Horse Farm." For the first time, the young man said embarrassedly, "Small." Li Hanlin snapped his fingers. The 50 men immediately separated from their horses and stood in a row. They pulled their Beiliang blades behind their backs and unbuckled their belts in unison. The 50 war horses stopped at almost the same time. They turned around and slowly stopped behind their masters. Beiliang had 300,000 cavalrymen, and the war horses were their wives. Moreover, they were much more obedient than real wives. They would never leave their wives. How many Beiliang cavalrymen had died on the battlefield? And how many war horses had starved to death after their masters died? "Platoon leader, I heard that last time you went to Beimang with Deputy Lu and Li Shiyu and killed your way north, you like to use barbarian heads as urinals?" "Bullshit. Platoon leader, why are you being so modest?" The brothers of the Little Snow Battalion all said so. Even the lieutenant didn't deny it. "Deputy Lu, don't you think so? Little Biao, you're still too young and ignorant. What's the use of asking Blockhead Lu? You should ask the wise and handsome Lord Li Shiyu. I'll tell you the truth, Li Shiyu, you peed your pants." "Ah, damn you. You dare to lie to me. Little Biao, you've just had sex in a brothel and you dare to make fun of Lord Li Shiyu? Take this. F***CKU, Li Daibiao, can you do it? Why did you pee all over my body? Go and pee on a ladle." Alright, stop. Same old rules, whoever pees the furthest will have their war horse eat first. Who is it today? Li Shiyu. Yes, it's definitely you, Li Shiyu. This pee will definitely be all over Beimang. That's right. Other than Li Shiyu, who else can pee so flirtatiously? Whoever is shameless, come out. I'll be the first to slap him. Damn it, I can tolerate other people's flattery, but it's clearly you, Jiao Changhong, who peed the furthest. You're still a platoon leader, can't you have some backbone? Li Shiyu, even if this bastard peed the furthest, he can only be the trash at the bottom. So you'll still be the first, it's a done deal. Ludo facepalmed. Having such a group of shameless subordinates was really a headache. Li Hanlin, the platoon leader, kept a straight face and nodded his head seriously. He fastened his belt and mounted his horse. After a short period of laughing and joking around, the 50 White Horse Scouts all mounted their horses again. No one was standing, sitting, or lying down sloppily. All of them straightened their backs. The 50 riders charged into the gate of the Xianli ranch in succession. There were only 50 men, 50 swords, and 50 crossbows, but the domineering aura of whoever blocked the way would die was vividly displayed in this silent and austere charge. The soldiers on the horse ranch's arrow tower stared blankly at the 50 riders. Their hearts swayed, and their faces were filled with worship and reverence from the bottom of their hearts. Chapter 1059. The group ascended the beacon tower at the peak of Luohu Hill. There was the old Grand Preceptor Sun Shiji, the green-robed scholar Cao Changqing, who was still ranked 4th in the martial rankings, Jiang Genai, who carried a red sandalwood sword case, and a dozen or so people from West Chu who had come out of Honglu Cave. Most of them had followed their fathers and retired to the mountains for many years and were in the prime of their lives. It was hard to imagine that this group of young people would become the pillars supporting the great cause of West Chu's restoration of the country. Among them, the youngest was not yet 20 years old. He carried 4 long swords on his back. He was the grandson of Lu Dantian, the great master of swordsmanship in West Chu. His name was Lu Sichu. He had come down the mountain this time to roam Jianghu. No one thought that he would be involved in the restoration of the country. However, the youth had spent some time with Li Chenggang in Honglu Cave. At that time, He did not know that the old man in the sheepskin fur coat who transplanted rice was the god of swords. It was too late for regrets. The youth's gaze kept sneaking glances at the princess in front of him. It was like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water. It was a long time, and it happened many times. However, the elders beside him were not in the mood to pay attention to the ignorant feelings of a child. Jiang Genai, who was ranked third in the Rouge ranking, also did not pay any attention to this delicate and pretty youth that she always felt had not grown up. As they were ascending the mountain, Pei Sui, the remaining evil of the Pei family of the spring and autumn period, said softly, "The puppet-like Duke of Huainan Zhao Ying has already sent his troops down the mountain. King of Jing'an Zhao Zun's 6,000 cavalry have also arrived at Qiao Ao Lake. The crown prince of Yang Kai Zhao Ju's 1,000 men and horses have temporarily not shown up. In my opinion, if our Da Chu wants to conquer the northern lands, we need to first take down these imperial troops under the banner of pacifying the rebellion to prevent future troubles. Moreover, after they fall, the various vassal kings' territories will have their own power to rise up in revolt. I think that Duke of Guangling Zhao Yi will not gamble his life and family as a stake and raise his troops to rally the other vassal kings." A burly old general who had been on the battlefield nodded in agreement. "Grand Preceptor, Mr. Cao, Pei Sui is right." Sun Shiji climbed the mountain strenuously, gasping for breath, as if he turned a deaf ear. Cao Changqing looked at the torrential Guangling River at the foot of Luohu Hill and smiled. "Xie Bian, tell me about it." Xie Bian was a skinny young man, only 4 or 5 years older than Lv Sichu. He said slowly, "If that's the case, our forces will be too scattered, which is exactly what Lu Shengxiong wants. This is a trap set up by the imperial court of Li Yang. The bait is the remnants of the fallen kingdoms of the spring and autumn dynasties, making us believe that we have an opportunity to take advantage of. In reality, when it comes to fighting wars, Eastern Yu, Northern Han, and Southern Tang are all far inferior to the truly elite armies of the Zhao clan. 20 years ago, this was the case. 20 years later, there's no need to even mention it. Only our great Chu still has a chance. Since they can't even be relied on to fight wars, there's no need to extravagantly hope that they can accomplish great things. For something like vying for the world, all talk is useless." Pei Sui was refuted by someone younger than her, but she did not fly into a rage out of humiliation. Instead, she sank into contemplation. Among the group, Xie Bian, who was born into a humble family, did not have the slightest bit of stage fright. Stopping his steps, he extended his finger and drew a line from west to east. In a deep voice, he said, "According to Southern Tang's #1 general, great ancestor Ji Yu, the geography of the world is generally higher in the northwest and lower in the southeast. Mountain ranges and waterways run horizontally from east to west, resulting in a confrontation between north and south. More often than not, the north has the advantage over the south. This is especially true for the south and east, which are covered by the ocean and lack room to maneuver. Many of the southern governments like to rely on the great rivers and rivers, using boats to engage in naval warfare to obstruct the northern cavalry from fighting on land. However, the Guangling Road, which is located in the middle of the north and south, is not the same. It has the natural advantage of guarding the river, as well as the valuable foundation of its geographical advantage. Thus, if we fail to defend the river, we can retreat to defend the Huai. If that doesn't work, we can still defend the river as our last resort, preventing us from collapsing 1,000 li. Since we have such a geographical advantage and manpower, we shouldn't waste it. There are only 2 things to do. The first is to beat them up. Directly gather our forces and look for an opportunity to defeat Lu Shengxiang, Yang Shunxing, and Yang Zhenchuan in one fell swoop. If we want to fight, we must directly break their morale. The second thing is very easy. Let's take a beating. Guarding the river, there are 4 major towns, and guarding the Huai, there are 6 places. Now that they are in our hands, we can just let those vassal kings' personal troops beat us up. Relying on them, Cao Changqing did not say that Xie Bian was right, nor did he say that he was wrong. He laughed softly and said, "Go on. I know you have the nickname Xie half sentence." Chapter 1060. Xie Bian nodded and said, Being beaten is not because Xie Shibian is looking down on the heroes of the world. It is because our Chu has the advantage and is not a cause for concern. When the Shu family's iron cavalry went south, our great general Shoujiang rebelled. However, we still made Shu Xiao suffer a lot on the two fronts of the Huaiyan River. The battle at the tomb of the princess, the great halberd warriors defending Jinghe, and then the decisive battle at West Leibi. In addition, there were many small and medium-sized battles. Which one of them was not beaten to the point where only bones were left and not meat were left? At that time, it was almost to the point where today, Xu Xiao gave Chu Lushan 3,000 soldiers and horses, and he could defeat everyone on the same day. If it were not for Chen Jibao's military strategy that was at the pinnacle of haggling over every detail, and if it were not for Yuan Zuozong, who had an excellent view of the overall situation, who was able to win several crucial battles in a row, Xu Xiao might not have been able to defeat West Leibi like a snake swallowing an elephant. When the young man said this, Grand Preceptor Sun Shiji suddenly lamented, "Unfortunately, there is no if in history. The winner is the king and the loser is the bandit." The great Da Chu became the fallen West Chu, and Li Yang became the ruler of the world. In fact, at that time, Da Chu looked at Li Yang the same way Li Yang looks at Beimang now. They were both uncivilized barbarians. Even if they put on the scholar's robes, they were still not worth mentioning. Xie Shibian respected the Grand Preceptor and waited quietly for a moment. Seeing that the old man had nothing else to say, he continued, "Now that the war between Li Yang and our Da Chu is about to begin, the people of the Zhao clan are not satisfied and think that victory is within their grasp. They are multitasking and want to win on both sides of the chessboard at the same time. One is to win against us, the other is to win against the world. Li Yang wants to borrow Da Chu's saber to kill people and chop off the last breath of the remnants of the spring and autumn people. That will depend on whether they have the ability to hold this saber tightly. So we have to strike quickly, accurately, and ruthlessly. In the end, Great Peace City only has two Ping vassals. One is Jiyu Gentang's old faction that has long moved north to the Liangliao border. The other is a new faction led by Lu Baijie and Lu Shengxiang of the Ministry of War. Jiyu Gentang is under the control of Beimang, and Lu Shengxiang has yet to fully develop his wings and is leading troops south. If we don't kill them now, when will we? Pei Sui frowned and said, "Lu Shengxiang is an old man of the Guangling Spring Snow Building. He is not unfamiliar with us. Won't he have a countermeasure?" Xie Shibian shook his head and said, "Lu Shengxiang knowing is one thing, whether he can do it or not is another. Just talk about the Ministry of War. Lu Shengxiang is only the left assistant minister, not even a minister. How can he control Yang Shunxing and Yang Zhenchuan, these old generals who have made meritorious contributions during the spring and autumn period? Besides," Pei Sui smiled and said, "You don't need to say the second half of your thanks. I know. The son of the Zhao family is incomparably conceited. Perhaps he is intentionally giving us a taste of the sweetness. Just as you said, the armies of the vassals are all bait. Since the Liang imperial court dares to have such disdainful thoughts, there is no harm in openly climbing up the pole." Xie Shibian smiled knowingly. Sun Shiji walked into the beacon and climbed the stairs to the top. He gazed at the rolling eastern dying water at the foot of the mountain. Other than Cao Changqing and Jiang Genai, the others had intentionally or unintentionally retreated far away. The old man said faintly, "The imperial court has asked me to return here to be the administrator of the Guangling Path. There are only 4 words, please enter the jar." Cao Changqing said softly, "The forces of Zhulu Mountain and the spies of Huang Sanjiu around the Guangling Path are all for us to use." The old man turned his head to look at this Confucian saint. He said with a sigh, "Changqing, Da Chu has dragged you down. The dragon carp of the Cao family was the proudest. After entering the palace at a young age, he studied under the imperial advisor Li Mi and made his debut in the imperial palace of Da Chu. After that, he was unknown for more than a decade. He was always a chess piece waiting for the emperor's orders. After Da Chu was destroyed, if this Cao Guanzi had not fought against Great Peace City alone, who would have remembered that there were still people in Da Chu? Cao Changqing shook his head and said, "Old Grand Preceptor, you know what I want, and know that I have no regrets." The old man put his hands on the brick wall. Luo Hu and Qiu Feng Sui, a young master Feng who was on duty, had such a large group of people standing on the top floor. He could only hold his halberd and shrink into a corner. But he could not suppress his excitement. Old Grand Preceptor, Cao Guanzi, and the princess. If he could see any one of them, his life would have been worth it. When Master Feng, who had a sword at his waist, saw the woman with the red sandalwood sword box walk towards him, he was stunned. The beautiful woman who was famed in Great Peace City for her sword reached out with a finger. Master Feng's sword came out of its sheath and landed in her hand. She looked at the old sword that had just been taken out of the armory and saw the light of day again. She used her finger to wipe away some of the rust that normal people could not wipe away. She flicked her finger and it gave off a string of tinkling sounds like wind chimes. Master Feng did not know how to take the sword from the princess's hands. He was completely distracted. Sun Shiji and Cao Changqing looked at each other and smiled. Jiang Ni said softly, "I will go to the western wall to take a look." Cao Changqing nodded. The young woman put 2 fingers together and swiped forward. The great Liang dragon sparrow came out of its sheath. She stood on the sword and floated down like an immortal. Then she made a sharp turn and rushed along the river to the ruins of the western wall. LV Sichu walked quickly to the side of the building and looked at the figure in a daze. The youth had seen the princess in the Red Deer Cave in Jiangnan a long time ago. But he remembered that at that time, Sister Jiang was lazy when practicing the sword. Her realm was not high. She had only learned the magical art of controlling the sword. But when she controlled the sword in the air, she was only a few feet above the ground and was shaky. The youth only knew that Sister Jiang had gone to Beiliang and Beimang, and her realm had improved rapidly. He could not even flatter her. In the past, he had to look up to her. He felt that it would be even more so in the future. The youth sighed. He did not know what kind of man Sister Jiang Ni would like in the future. In any case, it would not be him, LV Sichu. Sun Shiji suddenly lowered his voice and said indignantly, "That Shu family's son is not worthy of our princess." Cao Changqing's eyes were gentle. He said softly, "I don't know where he started, and I don't know where he will end." The Grand Preceptor was still angry and snorted. Cao Changqing had a sentence in his heart. HSU Fengnian, if one day I, Cao Changqing, turn from a scholar to a tyrant and become an earth immortal twice in my life, if I am still unable to protect the princess, don't disappoint me. Chapter 1061. Although a sparrow was small, it still had all the essentials. This was the case for the county yamen. The etiquette system was modeled after the 3 provinces and 6 ministries. Bishan County had 3 gates and 6 offices. Of the 3 gates, the soap gate was where the officials gathered, and the soap gate came from. As for the patrol gate, the roots of the Beiliang's roaming cavalry were in the patrol gate. The bailiff gate was easy to understand, and even a 3-year-old child would know about it. As for the responsibilities of the 6 offices, as far as Bishan County was concerned, County Magistrate Feng Guan monopolized the 4 offices of officials, workers, and punishment. He only left County Premiers Wujing with a ceremonial room in name only. County Magistrate Bai Shank could be considered to have gotten a rather lucrative military room. As for the 3 gates, Feng Guan monopolized them and viewed them as his exclusive property. This was especially true for the soap gate, which followed County Magistrate Feng Guan blindly, making Wujing especially embarrassed. Actually, as the county magistrate, HSU Fengnian should have been the one in charge of the soap gate. However, Feng Guan had even suppressed and ostracized county premiers Wujing mercilessly, so why would he care about HSU Fengnian's face? It was just that HSU Fengnian's attention was focused on observing the county yamen's operations. As for whether or not this half-baked county magistrate had any authority, it was not important. Although this county magistrate had no intention of fighting for power, he still wandered around the county yamen's 3 gates and 6 offices when he had nothing to do. There were more than a dozen criminals imprisoned in the torture chamber. There were all sorts of people. There were old men who were unable to retire and purposely came here to make a living. There were human traffickers, young ruffians who were looking for trouble, and lowly flower thieves who stole women's undergarments and were sent to prison. However, among the dozen of them, there was only one old man in his 60s who was handcuffed and shackled. The shackles were large and the shackles were heavy shackles. Altogether, they weighed 34 jin. HSU Fengnian had specially browsed through the files of the torture chamber, but he couldn't find any clues. Later, he invited the leader of the torture chamber to drink and finally got some information. He only knew that the old man's surname was Shun. He was a notorious bandit in Huzhou. It seemed that he had done a big business that cost him his head. After he succeeded, he didn't divide the loot evenly. Last year, he was attacked by a gang in Qingshan County of Yuzhou and was seriously injured. He fled to this county and was locked up for more than half a year. Originally, he should have been escorted to the county city to be executed at the beginning of this year. However, due to the change in Yuzhou, the new people in Bishan County replaced the old, so the execution was delayed. As for why he wasn't recorded in the torture chamber's records, it was because the leader of the torture chamber was drunk and didn't speak clearly. Since Xu Fengnian had nothing to do, he would come to the prison every few days. He would bring a pot of green ant wine and some scraps of meat to eat. He would move a chair to sit in the middle of the aisle and chat with the fellows who had been imprisoned on both sides of the aisle. In the end, other than Thief Shun, all the fellows in the prison would ask for green ant wine to drink. Xu Fengnian also rarely refused. After a few rounds, they actually became like drinking buddies. Old man Shun, on the other hand, had been watching coldly from the sidelines. Occasionally, he would open his eyes and look at them. Using the words of the prisoners in the torture chamber, this old bastard had killed several people. He had a murderous aura and a heavy yin aura. Every time the skinny old man forced his eyelids open, the corners of his mouth would curl up into a sinister sneer. He looked at the young registrar sitting outside the prison cell, as if he could pull that head off his shoulders with one hand if he wanted to. Every time this happened, the middle-aged man in the cell next to the only serious criminal in Bishan County would try his best to hide his worry. The man's surname was Wang, and he looked like an honest farmer. He seemed to have angered one of the big clans in Bishan County. Not only did he lose his family fortune, he was also thrown into prison. In the past half a year, the big clan's disciples had come twice. Each time, they had mocked and ridiculed him. They had even sinisterly declared that they would definitely help support the man's wife and daughter. Even some of the prisoners in the prison felt that this guy was too pitiful. They might as well kill themselves. The enemy's family was enjoying the mother and daughter outside. Could it be that this brother of yours was complaining to those rats that often crawled over his face when he slept? No wonder he was born with a pair of drooping eyebrows. Just by looking at him, one could tell that he was destined to suffer. Today, HSU Fengnian sat in the prison cell and chatted with the prisoners. He had just received his salary yesterday. Most of it had been confiscated by Pei Nanwei. He didn't know where she had hidden it. Only a few small taels of silver were left. They said it was enough for a month's worth of wine and that he should do as he saw fit. But now, the tables had turned. After Feng Guan gave the registrar a workshop, it was mostly county premiers Wu Jing who treated HSU Fengnian to wine. As a result, HSU Fengnian's finances were not as tight as before. However, the workshop in Bishan County, which was in charge of farming and irrigation, could only get some meat from mosquitoes' legs. It was not worth mentioning. More importantly, for the first time, County Magistrate Feng had taken the initiative to curry favor with the registrar. This made the county Yarman's odd-job workers think highly of the registrar. However, when Wu Jing was drinking, he had intentionally or unintentionally reminded the registrar Xu, who was in the dark. HSU Fengnian pretended to be muddle-headed. Wu Jing thought that this kid was possessed and was waiting to see a joke. HSU Fengnian pulled over two jailers who were already familiar with him. The three of them ate cooked meat to go with the wine. If there were any prisoners who were envious, they would also ask the jailers to send them some meat and wine. When a well-dressed young man walked into the cell with a sachet covering his nose, it was inevitable that he was surprised. There were 3 people drinking and eating meat in the corridor. Most of the prisoners were sitting by the wooden bars of the cells near the corridor. Everyone was laughing and talking about dirty things. The young man frowned. HSU Fengnian picked up a wine cup and wiped it with his sleeve. He raised the cup with a smile and asked if the young man wanted a mouthful of green ants. The young man gave him a sidelong glance and ignored him. The two jailers knew what was going on. They secretly cast a glance at the Registrar General and then pointed at the prisoner surnamed Wang. HSU Fengnian smiled and nodded. The young master walked straight to the farmer's cell. Just as he was about to say something to rub salt into the man's wound, 4 burly bailiffs were holding 2 prisoners of different ages. The older one had shifty eyes and the younger one's clothes were ragged. However, he had a pair of dashing eyebrows that exuded a heroic spirit. Even though his face was covered in dirt, people could not help but take a few more glances at him. They only felt that he did not fit in with this prison. However, his steps were slightly slower and he was punched in the back by a bailiff. He staggered and almost fell to the ground. The older accomplice hurriedly supported him and smiled obsequiously at the bailiffs. HSU Fengnian smiled and asked, "What crime did you commit?" The 4 bailiffs were closer to County Magistrate Feng Kui and County Magistrate Bai Shank. They had never paid much attention to this registrar. However, they had more or less accumulated some worldly wisdom in the officialdom. The leader of the bailiffs squeezed out a lukewarm smile and said, in reply to Registrar, it was 2 lowly thieves. They were extremely daring and stole into this old man Zhu's house. They should count themselves lucky that they were not beaten to death on the spot. After he finished speaking, the bailiff quickly walked over to the young man who was using a scented pouch to cover up the stench of the prison. He smiled humbly and said, "Isn't this young Master Song from the county capital? It's an honor to see you. Young Master Song, don't worry. As for that ignorant trash, when we have time, we will entertain him. I guarantee that he will suffer a fate worse than death." The young man with a feminine temperament took out a brocade money pouch and casually threw it to the leader of the bailiffs. He said softly, "Don't really kill him. It's not a big deal, but it's troublesome. I'm not afraid of trouble, but I'm afraid of trouble." The bailiff who had made a windfall laughed and said, "We know what we're doing. Every time we beat him, we put 2 or 3 layers of cotton cloth on him. There are no visible wounds. It's all internal injuries." The young man looked around and his gaze finally fell on the man surnamed Wang. He pointed at him and laughed, "These 2 thieves, why don't we just throw them in here?" The bailiff did not hesitate and said, "That's not difficult." The young man turned his head to look at the 2 thieves and said with a smile, "After you go in, take care of that old guest. If you take good care of him, you will naturally have a feast of wine and meat." The monkey-cheeked old thief swallowed his saliva and glanced at the small table where the Director General was sitting. He asked timidly, "Sir, can we buy some wine on credit first? I'm sure that once I move in, I'll try to get close to your old friends." Chapter 1062. The young master looked at HSU Fengnian. From his point of view, such a small matter was not something a county's registrar official would dare to refuse. Even if he was a newcomer to Bishan County, he should have heard of the Song family's reputation in Yanji County. However, he quickly raised his eyebrows, and a gloomy expression appeared between his brows. That young registrar official actually reached out his hand and lightly covered the wine cup. It was obvious that he was not giving him any face. The old thief, who most likely would not be able to drink, saw this scene and was secretly delighted. Since he had unintentionally fanned the flames once, causing a rift between an official and a big playboy, it was not much worse than drinking to his heart's content. Young Master Song sniffed the fragrant sandalwood fragments from the sachet and smiled sinisterly. "Good, I didn't think that there would be someone in Bishan County that I, Song Yu, could not invite. Thank you for your advice." The middle-aged man surnamed Wang, who had never tried to strike up a conversation with HSU Fengnian, raised his head and smiled gratefully at this registrar official who did not seem to know the rules of officialdom. Song Yu, the son of the Song family of Yanji County, directly walked out of the cell. After the bailiffs pushed the 2 thieves into the cell, they also left in large strides. After the registrar official offended young Master Song, he did not even bother to say goodbye. Registrar official Shu, who had inadvertently made an enemy, stood up and was about to leave the cell when the old felon with the large bridle suddenly grinned and said, "Young man surnamed Shu, your position as an official is quite interesting. I've drunk a few cups of your wine. Don't you mind dirtying my mouth? Come, Bring me some wine. Hsu Fengnian was indifferent. He walked out of the cell and left the wine and meat to the jailer. The old felon cursed and swore, but his eyes met with his two new neighbors. They both nodded. It was a moonlit night with few stars. Hsu Fengnian was on duty in the workshop. The workshop was in the same row as the torture chamber, but it was in a different row. It was further back, but not far from the prison. Although Bishan County was not worth mentioning, there were many experts in the patrolling, arresting, and torture chamber. Bishan County's jurisdiction was large, and there were many disputes. Furthermore, the number of people in the Yamen was limited. If one did not have any real ability, they would have to squat in the latrine pit. This latrine pit had long been tormented by the criminals until it stank. The previous officials of the Yamen were still able to see the severity of the matter. If too many cases of murder and arson were piled up, it would no longer be a small matter. Hsu Fengnian was the only one in the workshop. He suddenly stood up, poured himself a cup of wine, and walked out of the room. Coincidentally, he bumped into 4 people walking out of the prison. They were all wearing prison guard uniforms that did not fit them well. Hsu Fengnian was stunned on the spot. He was about to say something when the old felon, who had been freed from his shackles, rushed forward like lightning and punched him in the forehead. The registrar official flew backwards. Before he landed heavily on the ground, the bandit who had suddenly attacked caught up with him. The bandit lifted his leg and placed it on his back. The registrar official's body quietly landed on the ground without a sound. The old man's wrinkled fingers intertwined as he laughed. It's been a long time since I've exercised my muscles and bones. I couldn't help myself and almost missed the important matter of the cicada shedding its carapace. Among the 3 people behind the old man, there were 2 bandits and the farmer surnamed Wang who had a tragic past. The latter saw this scene and could not bear to see it. The 2 in front had cold expressions. One of the young men walked forward and glanced at the registrar official lying on the ground. He said softly, "Eldershan, this person is an official. Why don't you take him as a hostage? Bishan County's night patrol has always been strict. It's quite troublesome. If something happens along the way, at least we can have a protective talisman. It's not too late to kill him." The old man thought for a while and beckoned to the farmer. He said, "Wang Shuwei, you still have some strength. Carry this person and follow this old man into the mountains. In the future, it will be easy for you to find that Song family descendant for revenge." The farmer, who had a bitter face all year round, did not say anything and carried the registrar official on his back. The 4 of them, plus the unconscious registrar official, were familiar with the way. The young man who broke into the prison opened the way. When they heard any noise, they would stop and hide. When they could not hide, they would leap onto the wall. Their lightness skills were excellent. Only Wang Shuwei, who only had a few jin of brute strength, did not have any martial arts skills. The old man with the surname Shen gently grabbed him by the shoulder and carried him up the wall. This was probably what ordinary people called leaping onto roofs and vaulting over walls. The group of people left the county office without any danger. Bishan County did not have any deep trenches or high walls. Tonight, they also did not encounter any patrols. Just like that, they easily escaped into the distance. On a secluded path, 3 men dressed in black met them. The old man stepped on the ground and landed on the back of one of the horses. There were no outsiders around. He laughed loudly and said, "Liu Yu, you and Wang Shuwei ride on the same horse. While you're at it, kill that registrar official and dump his corpse in the wilderness. Treat it as this old man's parting gift to Bishan County." The farmer plucked up his courage and said, "This registrar official is not a bad person. Senior, do you want to be merciful?" The old man sneered and said, "Whether he is a good person or not, it's hard to say. But since he is a good official, he deserves to die. Wang Shuwei, where did you get this woman's kindness from? A dog can't change its habit of eating shit. Serves you right that your wife and daughter were bullied by those weak and powerless descendants of the big clans. If it were this old man, even if he did not have this set of skills, he would still be able to kill that sissy with the scented sachet today." The farmer was silent. He wanted to say something but stopped. Seeing the young man called Liu Yu by the old man walk over, he gritted his teeth and moved back a few steps. He seemed to have made up his mind to protect the life of the young official on his back. Seeing this, the old man frowned and said, "Wang Shui, this old man took you out of prison in passing because he saw that you are also a pitiful person. Don't push your luck." This old man's temper is indeed 1,000 times better than when he was young, but the nickname heart-piercing hand given to him by his peers in Jianghu is still there. If you don't let go of that registrar official, this old man won't care if Liu Yu kills you as well. Besides, if you want to find a place to sit in the immortal coffin cave, you have to kill someone as proof of your allegiance. This old man will give you one last chance. Either you go to the Yellow Springs with that bullshit registrar official, or I personally kill that brat behind you and go up Mount Fuyi in a grand manner. This old man has some friendship with the mountain master and the cave master, so he can put in a few good words for you. Otherwise, even if you go up the mountain, no one will treat you as a green onion. Think about it yourself. The honest farmer was in a dilemma and couldn't make up his mind. Feng Guan's face was gloomy. The second-in-command, Zhuo Jing, was expressionless. However, he was secretly delighted. Feng Guan held great power in his hands. Putting aside the fact that the felon surnamed Shun had escaped because he was never recorded in the first place, he could still mend the pen after the sheep were lost. However, that fellow surnamed Wang was someone that the local tyrant of the prefecture capital, the Song family, had set their sights on. Otherwise, they wouldn't have spent so much money to use the prefecture capital's prison to bring him to the tiny Bishan county. Feng Guan couldn't even handle such a small matter. How could he hope to be promoted to the prefecture capital in the future? Even if he was lucky enough to be promoted, wouldn't he be afraid that the Song family would make things difficult for him? When it rains, it pours. Zhuo Jing tilted his head slightly and stared at the red candles as thick as a baby's arm in the hall. He couldn't help but smile when he heard the servant report that Song Yu had come to visit the county yamen. However, Zhuo Jing soon couldn't smile because Song Yu, the son of a noble family, had asked to dismiss the miscellaneous staff in the county yamen, leaving only the county magistrate and deputy. Only then did Zhuo Jing put away his arrogant expression and cupped his fists. He said, "Song Yu has offended you earlier. Please forgive me. Shun Li, nicknamed the heart-piercing king of hell, is a bandit who has been on the run from Yuju for many years. Song Yu once had an identity in the Yanji County Yamen. Wang Shui is the head of the constables in Qingshan County. All of their plans were to let the tiger return to the mountain and find out where the nest of Fuxiao Mountain was. In addition to Lord Wang, there is also County Magistrate Bai, who invited the elite scouts of Ruojiang and 100 light cavalry. When the time comes, we only need to coordinate with Lord Wang from the inside." At this moment, a woman carrying a box of food walked into the hall of the yamen to deliver supper. Song Yu was somewhat stunned. Putting aside the fact that this woman's beauty was rarely seen in his life, how could she directly enter the heavily guarded yamen? Even if she was a family member of an official, she shouldn't be so reckless. County Magistrate Feng Guan and Deputy Zhuo Jing were in a good mood at the same time. Feng Guan quietly smoothed the corner of his mouth and said with a worried face, "Madam Shu, Registrar Shu has been kidnapped by bandits. We don't know whether he is alive or not. However, please don't worry. The Yamen of Bishan County will do its best to rescue him." Before the county magistrate finished speaking, the woman said "oh" lightly and turned to leave. Zhuo Jing smiled while stroking his beard. Could it be that this woman, whose appearance could bring disaster to the country and people, was actually not on good terms with Registrar Shu, who had a lot of luck with women? Zhuo Jing glanced at the county magistrate, whose eyes were burning with passion, and sneered in his heart. "Registrar Shu, oh Registrar Shu, even if you don't die in the hands of bandits, you will die in the hands of the county magistrate." What was the famous saying in the spring and autumn period? Zhuo Jing quickly remembered it. "Brother, die in peace. I will take care of your wife." Zhuo Jing was now thinking about how he could ask the county magistrate for a cup of leftovers. Otherwise, he should withdraw his backup plan and stop fighting to the death. Instead, he should wholeheartedly assist the proud and arrogant county magistrate. At worst, the two of them could peacefully become brothers-in-law under the table. Pei Nanwei walked out of the county yamen and walked on the deserted street. She looked at the night sky and said softly, "You don't want to go home at night, do you? Don't you think sleeping on the floor is enough?" Chapter 1063. There was an old man with an awe-inspiring nickname who spared the dog official's life. It was not because he was kind, but because Wang Shuwei had promised to exchange his life for Senior Shen's life. He was willing to owe Senior Shen his life. When the time came, he could take the official's life away with just a word. Everyone in Beiliang valued their promises. Moreover, Wang Shuwei was a man with a loose tongue but an honest heart. Shen Li, who had seen countless people, believed in his own judgment. In any case, a small county princess would not be able to escape death once she entered the tiger's den of Mount Fu Yao. If he did not kill her personally, he would not be considered breaking his promise. He would still be able to take the life of a simple and unsophisticated man for free. 6 people rode toward Mount Fu Yao in the chilly moonlight. The registrar was casually thrown onto the horse's back. Wang Shuwei did not know how to ride a horse, so he sat behind Liu Yu. Shen Li urged the horse to gallop wildly. He did not care about the poor registrar, who was jolted up and down by the horse's back. He rolled off the horse and was covered in dust. Everybody had no choice but to stop and fall back onto the horse's back. Mount Fu Yao was 200 li away. This was what Shen Li and the other Jianghu people called it. The woodcutters and hunters of Yanji Prefecture were used to calling it Mount Jinji. Because there were many red-bellied golden pheasants on the mountain, Beiliang's playboys were addicted to cockfighting and often used this type of pheasant. However, it was rumored that remnants of the devil cult had taken over Mount Jinji. They were all vicious bandits who killed without blinking an eye. Few people went there. Even the old hunters did not dare to take their lives lightly. Therefore, red-bellied golden pheasants had always been priceless in the vicinity of Yanji Prefecture. The peaks of Mount Fu Yao stretched for dozens of li. The mountains were high and the rivers were long. The scenery was elegant. It had a rare green color in Yuju. It was a heavenly paradise, but because of those bandits, the atmosphere was foul. Looking at the mountain range in broad daylight, it gave people a gloomy feeling. It wasn't that Yanji County hadn't taken action to suppress the bandits on a large scale before, but ever since 80 strong and powerful people went out and only one madman came back alive, no one was willing to touch this bad luck. For the sake of money, the whole family of a woodcutter who led the way for the officers and soldiers were quickly hanged from high branches. Their mouths were stuffed with large pieces of gold and silver. The mountain path of Mount Fu Yi was narrow and rugged, barely allowing one rider to advance slowly. It was dawn when they entered the mountain. When the first rays of the morning sun gradually deepened and the mountain fog gradually dispersed, there was no more mountain path beneath the feet of the 6 riders. They could only rely on their experience to climb up the mountain. At noon, their field of vision suddenly opened up. It was actually a large expanse of white walls and black tiles built against the mountain. On the left side of the building, there was a slender waterfall that was not very imposing. It was charming and gentle. It was as if they had walked into a notorious gambling house only to discover that the manager of the house was a petite and exquisite young woman. Shen Li turned his head and smiled. "Wang Shuwei, this is the real Mount Fu Yi. Don't look at the mountains outside as they have no signs of human habitation. They have hidden beacons and are not much different from an army. There are more than 300 people on this mountain. Regardless of whether they are young or old, they all have some skills. Not to mention Yanji County, even if the Yuju general wanted to enter the mountain, he wouldn't be able to come here without sacrificing thousands of lives. Moreover, there are mountains beyond mountains. 3 li away from Mount Fu Yao, there are more than 100 real men in the immortal coffin cave. There are as many experts as there are clouds. The cave master of the Hidden Sword Cave was already a master long before he entered the mountain. Compared to Mount Fu Yao's second-level expert Zhong Juxian, his strength can only be higher." Shen Li laughed and retracted his gaze. He looked up the mountain. "Why am I talking to a villager like you about this? Even if you start practicing martial arts today, you won't be able to do anything. You won't be able to become an expert if you only have strength. If you want revenge, then in the future on the mountain, You'll have to tuck your tail between your legs and be a good person. After a few years, bring 20 or 30 brothers down the mountain. A tender song family disciple will naturally be easy to capture. At that time, you'll be at your mercy. There are many rough men on the mountain who like the style of men with broken sleeves. You don't have to worry about your enemy dying too comfortably. Master Registrar, this old man knows that he woke up half an hour ago. Don't pretend to be asleep. These words are meant for you. Master Registrar of Bishan County slid down from his horse and rubbed his stomach. His internal organs were probably all messed up from the jolt. His face was dispirited. Wang Shui also jumped down from his horse. After walking closer, he said apologetically, "Master Registrar, I'm sorry." Sinner Wang Shui, without waiting for the man to finish, Master Registrar made a move to hit him. However, he quickly retracted his hand and sighed heavily. He looked at the mountain that he didn't know why it was called a talisman. He was lost in thought. Liu Yu pushed his shoulder. Master Registrar followed Wang Shui up the steps. The bluestone path was hidden in the shade of the trees on both sides. Even though it was noon, the summer heat wasn't heavy. As they climbed up the steps, they didn't see many whistles in the open. Shun Li escaped from prison and revisited the old place. He seemed to have some sentiments. Liu Yu followed beside the old senior and whispered to each other. When they reached a pavilion halfway up the mountain, 2 white-clothed children holding books appeared from the side of the path. Their lips were red and their teeth were white. Behind them was a white-haired old man in white riding a yellow ox. He looked even more like an immortal. He sang loudly, riding on the back of a yellow ox, hands down facing the spring breeze. This made Wang Shui mistakenly think that he was an immortal who lived in seclusion in the mountains. Shun Li stood at the top of the steps and exposed the old immortal master. He laughed, "Mountain Lord Wei, what's the use of pretending to be a ghost on the mountain? With this outfit, you can only deceive people outside the mountain. However, among the 10 bandits of Yuju, you, Old Man Wei, are ranked higher than me. Once you show yourself, you'll be chased down by hundreds of cavalrymen." The old mountain lord of Mount Fu Yarrow sneered, "Heartrending king of Hell Shun Li, how could this old man dare to be ranked with you as one of the 10 bandits of Yuju? You're even called King of Hell. You're even scarier than a butcher. If it weren't for the fact that Brother Giant Immortal is an old acquaintance of yours and owes you, this old man wouldn't have let his disciple get involved in this muddy water in Bishan County." Shun Li twisted his right wrist with 2 fingers on his left hand and laughed softly, "Wei Jin, you and I aren't any good people. We're about the same. Back then, the master of the profound sword cave didn't use his sword to tear your mouth apart. Why don't you know how to cherish it?" The old man, perhaps one of the leaders of Mount Fu Yarrow, glanced at Registrar Shu and the farmer Wang Shui in puzzlement. His disciple Liu Yu walked to Yellow Ox's side and roughly explained the situation. The old man nodded and then shook his head. He took the lead and rode up the mountain. The 2 white-clothed children walked with light and agile steps. It was obvious that they were also skilled in lightness skill. Being able to become the disciple of Mount Fu Yarrow's top 3 expert, Mountain Lord Wei, their foundation and luck were certainly not bad. HSU Fengnian's face was bruised and swollen. He had deliberately restrained his qi so that his body was no different from an ordinary person's. Even his breathing was no exception. After all, Wei Jin was not a real immortal. Naturally, he couldn't tell what realm this young official was in. Xu Fengnian and Wang Shui were settled in a remote courtyard. There were even 2 middle-aged and delicate servant girls serving them. Looking at how happy they were, they should be girls who had been abducted to the mountain when they were young. It was hard to say whether they were pitiful or fortunate. After all, they could live a life of luxury on the mountain, but at the very least, they did not have to worry about food and clothing. Wang Shui waited for the servant girls, whose eyes were full of curiosity, to serve tea and food. He closed the door and left. This middle-aged man, who used to be one of the top bailiffs in Qingshan County, carefully walked to the window and put his ear to the window paper. When he didn't hear the slightest sound, he sat back down at the table and looked at the county magistrate who was wolfing down the food. He was about to speak when HSU Fengnian grabbed a greasy chicken leg and threw it at Wang Shui, stopping him from speaking. He glared at him and said in exasperation, King Wang Shui, you caused me, a dignified county magistrate, to become a prisoner. If I can return to Bishan County, I'll skin you alive and pull out your tendons. Wang Shui caught the chicken leg and smiled bitterly. I hope the magistrate can leave the mountain safely. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, the magistrate picked up a bamboo stick and leisurely picked his teeth. He leaned against the back of the chair and put his feet on the table. Then, he and the chair fell to the floor. Wang Shui suddenly turned and looked up. He saw a beautiful woman sitting on the beam with a knife on her knees. She grinned, revealing a pair of canine teeth. Wang Shui was shocked. Just now, he did not notice anything strange. If he revealed everything to Registrar Shu, then he would really kill this young official who was not bad at all. The woman looked to be in her early 20s. A short knife wrapped in a sheath of gold was placed on her knees. She floated down from the beam and circled around Hsu Fengnian. She looked at him from head to toe several times. On Fufu Mountain, she had seen all kinds of outlaws since she was young. However, it was the first time she saw a pitiful official wearing the official's skin. She reached out and pinched Hsu Fengnian's embroidered bird official's patch. She smiled and asked, "How high are you? What's this thing embroidered on it?" Hsu Fengnian pretended to be calm and said, in reply to Miss, "I am a 6th-rank official. I am the magistrate of Bishan County. I am a secondary 6th-rank civil official. The embroidered on it is a heron." The woman tugged at the official's patch and withdrew her hand. She was still reluctant to part with it. She said, "Snowsuit has snow-white hair and a jade-like mouth. She often raises her feet to look at the ship's window. She is a white heron. This miss knows. Why don't you give me this official's robe? This miss will guarantee your safety on Fufu Mountain. How about it?" Ignoring Wang Shui's signal, Hsu Fengnian's righteousness was inappropriate. He said in a low voice, "A scholar prefers death to humiliation." Wang Shui sighed. The young woman slapped the sesame official's patch and rolled her eyes. "Scholar your head. Humiliation you bastard. You are as sarcastic as Grandpa Wei. However, do you have Grandpa Wei's skills? You, just wait for the punishment of being cut by fish scales. You know fish scales, right? Slice by slice, you will be scraped into a carp with fish scales lifted off. Humph, senior brother Monkey's knife skills are only slightly inferior to my father's." As she spoke, the woman raised her arm and made a hand chop. She then smiled and asked, "I will give you one more chance. Are you going to take it off or not?" This woman was an impatient person. Seeing that the fellow didn't move, she shouted for this miss to do it herself. Very quickly, she took off the official's robe, threw it over her shoulder, and happily skipped out of the room. Hsu Fengnian sat back in his chair and filled Wang Shui's cup with wine. He muttered, "She really is a female bandit." Wang Shui said with regret, "Magistrate Shu, you should have agreed to this woman's request." Chapter 1064. Hsu Fengnian smiled. "Thank you for your kindness." Wang Shui hesitated for a moment, then moved his chair and said in a low voice, "To tell you the truth, Registrar Shu, I'm Wang Shui, a constable from Qingdian County. I've been following Shen Li's bandits for 6 years. For the past 6 months, I've worked together with my old friend Song Yu from Yanji County to set up this trap. I didn't expect Registrar Shu to be in danger." Hsu Fengnian asked, "Aren't you afraid that I'll leak it?" Wang Shui shook his head. "My mission is complete as long as I reach Mount Fuyao. After that, it'll depend on whether Song Yu and County Magistrate Bai can get enough people to suppress the bandits." Wang Shui was worried and said with emotion, "But in my opinion, the outcome is hard to predict. Song Yu and I estimated that 100 elite soldiers and 300 to 400 constables from Qingdian County and Yanji County would be enough to kill their way into Mount Fuyao and eradicate this malignant tumor that has taken root in Yuju for many years. Along the way, we've set up beacons in accordance with the art of war, and the hidden posts and whistles are quite methodical. What I'm afraid is that when the 500 soldiers of the government finally enter the mountain, the bandits of Mount Fuyao and Immortal Coffin Cave would rather abandon their lairs than fight. Bandits are easy to suppress, but roaming bandits are hard to find. HSU Fengnian asked curiously, Constable Wang, you've put so much thought into it, and you're even willing to take the risk yourself. What are you after? Wang Shuwei was stunned, then smiled. What am I after? Registrar Shu, may I be so bold as to ask you a question? As an official, shouldn't you be helping the people? I've been a constable for most of my life, and I've seen more than 60 brothers die in the line of duty. If you really want to talk about what I'm after, it's nothing more than peace of mind. This time, it was HSU Fengnian's turn to be stunned. Then he smiled and raised his cup. Here's to you. Wang Shuwei raised his glass and drained it in one gulp. Then, he poured himself another glass. This wine is really good. Normally, my salary is enough to support my family, but I can't afford to drink this wine. HSU Fengnian muttered to himself, yes, your salary should be increased. Wang Shuwei laughed heartily, Registrar Shu, thank you for your kind words. HSU Fengnian took a sip of wine and asked, according to the heart-slicing Yama, the master of the Deep Sword Cave has the strength of a master and might be a level 1 expert. Zhong Juxian of Mount Fuyao is also an expert who has been famous for a long time. Not to mention the 400+ bandits on the 2 mountains, just the 2 of them are enough to deal with the soldiers.